Thank you, John. It's so lekker to be with you guys. And I just really trust that tonight God really speaks to each one of our hearts, mine included. Got a message that I feel God's laid on my heart, and it's a little bit of a challenge in places. Hopefully God through Abraham speaks to us. So one of the few times God has spoken to me really clearly in my life, he said this to me, because I was moaning and groaning about how tough things were. He said to me, "Are you prepared to take only the good? What about the bad?" And so I've been serving God for about 46 years, and the one thing that I feel I've learned is that life is not just good and it's not just bad. It's both. It's like the two sides of a coin. And we need to handle both in faith and trust Him, whether it's good or whether it's bad. We're going to have trials, but we're also going to have victories. So often we focus on the problems, the negatives, and we have a thing in life called a testimony. Sometimes we, as Christians, give testimonies and they turn out to be 80% negative and then 20%, and I really don't think it needs to be like that. In fact, I think there's far more victories than the issues. And so God has ways and means of working through this with us. And this session is all about trusting God, having faith in spite of anything. And I want to say this, that you need faith and faithfulness. I kind of put the two of those words together. And perhaps more in the good times than you do in the bad. And I'll tell you why. Because in those bad times, in those rough times, God actually carries us through. But in the good times, we're still going to be faithful, even though the windows of heaven are open above us and it's all very easy. So I'm going to share a little bit of my story later on. But let's get into a bit of Abraham. What is God, this is a question for us each, what is God calling you to trust Him for no matter what? So I think that many times in life, just the hecticness of life, the busyness, we get into kind of a rut, and we're just carrying on, one day after another, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year after another, and we're just mulling on. But I think God has got something special for each one of us. What is He calling you to trust Him for, no matter what happens? Don't ever think that this is about 100% faith, with no doubt at all. Don't think that that's where you have to be, where you're just absolutely full of faith and you never doubt. You'll see Abraham had his doubts. You'll see the consequences of them. No man out there ever is without doubt. It's about putting those doubts aside and trusting God anyway. That's the issue. It's like, point taken, but I'm trusting God anyway. And we're just going to keep going. So, what is your thing at the moment that you're trusting God no matter what? There must be issues in each one of our lives where there are things that we need to trust God no matter what. And I want to just be vulnerable. I have a thing that I have to trust God no matter what. I have a son who was brought up in a Christian home, in a godly home, and he has gone in his own way, gone off on a tangent, got himself lost, doesn't want to speak to us at the moment. But I'm trusting God that he will come back to Jesus in a mighty way. I always say he is building a testimony for himself. So, let's talk about Abraham. This is something that Patrick Morley says in his book, and I'm quoting it directly. He says, "While writing this chapter, I spent many hours with a man who once encouraged his wife to sleep with another man so he could get ahead. He also fathered a child with his housekeeper and later cut the mom and child off financially. Once, when he was surrounded by thugs who had their eyes on his pretty wife, he pretended to be single to avoid getting beaten up. What kind of man would do those things? Serious? What kind of man would do those things? You'd be surprised to learn that he's talking about Abraham. That's the guy we're going to learn some lessons from tonight. So none of the 10 men that we're going to talk about tonight were perfect. They all had their faults. I mean, we're going to probably talk about David at some stage. We know David had lots of faults. But you can't ever always be suitable for the job, completely able or a perfect fit. I look at Peter and Paul. Paul was a Jew of Jews, a Pharisee of Pharisees and all this. You would have thought God would have sent Paul to the Jews. Not so. Peter was a fisherman, uneducated man. You would have thought he would have gone to the Gentiles. But no, other way around. Why? Because you don't have to be qualified to be able to be used of God. In fact, I would say it disqualifies you, because otherwise you get the glory and not God. So Abraham's story was included in the Bible because he faced 3 different tests that you and I will face or have faced at some time of our lives, and look at those three tests tonight. The first test, going and not knowing. Abraham spent most of his life in the town of Ur. He was probably very comfortable, very settled. It was located in what is now southern Iraq, a bustling city, great economy, vibrant culture. And at 75, Abraham was healthy, wealthy, and wise. Amazing, no doubt, settled down, maybe a man of stature in his community. Quite a manier. There's only one problem. Abraham and Sarah didn't have a child. That was a big issue. Many people don't want kids these days, but in those days, it was a big issue. And no doubt a deep pain for them. But everything else was just great. One day God spoke. The Bible doesn't tell us how he spoke to Abraham, but I want to tell you from experience, when God speaks to you, you'll know he's speaking to you. There'll be no argument about that in your mind. And this message changed everything. We're looking at Genesis 12 now. And God says, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. So this is like just God saying, well, go, and when you get there, you'll know that it's there. Because no directions, just like, off you go. And quite a shocking conversation, I guess. Anybody been in a situation like that, where they felt that God's just prompting them to go without really knowing where to go, how to go, what to do? But he says to this is part of the promise. This is the response that God gives to Abraham. If you do this, if you will believe me, if you will have faith and you will go, this is what I'll do for you. Make you a great and blessed nation. Okay, what does that mean? That means lots of kids, plenty of them. Nation, offspring, people. I'll make your name great. You'll be a blessing to others. I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And all the people of the earth will be blessed through you. What an incredible promise, eh? If you will just do this little thing that I'm calling you to do, that's what I'll do in return. Just reminds me that if we're in a place, perhaps we're far from God, when you take one step towards him, he'll take 1,000 steps towards you. And that's what he was saying. Just a little thing. Just, Abraham, just go, and this is what I'll do for you. So Abraham passes the test. This is what Hebrews tells us. This is the answer that Abraham gave. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. So God routinely tests our faith. That's the nature of God. He wants to check us out. Let's see if you'll believe me. Let's see if you'll be faithful in spite of. Part of a process that God makes to mature us, to grow us in our faith. So the question is, will we believe and go, or will we cling to what's safe, what we're used to, what we're comfortable with? Now, we had a little incident like that in 2008. We were in leadership in a church in Joburg, my wife and I, and we've started to feel in our hearts that God had church leadership for us, where we would actually go and be leaders of a church. And as all good NCMI church leaders do, they go on a course called Church Planters. What that was you went from church to church, visiting churches, looking at how they operated, chatting to the guys that led them, and that was preparing you to one day lead. So when we got to Durban, there was a church that we stayed with some people, and they were in a church, and they said to us, hey, you guys what are you doing here? So we told them, this is what we're doing. They said, well, our church doesn't have a pastor. Why don't you come and lead that? And so we prayed about it. We consulted quite widely, and we went. We left Joburg 1st of January 2009. We landed in Durban to lead a church. And that was quite a journey. We were very comfortable up in Joburg. We were on staff, full-time on staff, loved the church we were in, knew lots and lots of people, got to do ministry up there in the comfort of a home church, and we launched out into the unknown and came here to Durban. God had called us. We left our adult kids behind and came on a 7-year mission of leading the church. So church leadership is not for everybody. And I want to say that because of this. If we were all church leaders, there would be no sheep to shepherd. Okay. I want to say to you guys, and I'm no longer in ministry, that we are in ministry no matter where you are. In the workplace, in your own business, retired. I always think retired guys have coffee shop ministries. You're in ministry no matter what. Don't equate ministry to being in church leadership or leading a church itself. So the question is this: in what God's tugging at your heart about? And it doesn't have to be anything. You don't have to be called to go to another city as Abraham was, or go to a place that I'll tell you later about. It might just be something in your life that God's calling you to. Or maybe something He's calling you to forsake. Saying, I'm wanting to do something in your life, but this thing is in the way. And we need to deal with that. What is that thing? I'm not asking you to say, just deal with God on it, because He's calling, whether you like it or not. So the second test that Abraham was a 25-year wait. 75 years old. Sarah is probably about 65, 66. She's way past childbearing age, apart from being barren. And God's promise, I'll make you a great nation. How does that start? As we said, with plenty of children. So standing out in the countryside, we've all been into the country, and in the city you can't really see the stars, but standing out in the countryside, you look up into the heavens, and there's just stars everywhere. Well, that's what happened to Abraham. And God said, hey, check those stars out. That's how many kids you're going to have, or offspring you're going to have, or the nation I'm going to build you. What do you think? How hard was it for Abraham to believe that? Okay? Here he is, 75 years old, no kids, and God says, look at the offspring you're going to have. But he believed. Abraham was a man of faith, and he said, God, it may seem absolutely impossible, but nothing's impossible with you. It seemed to me nothing absolutely impossible, but you can do it. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him for righteousness. That's why Abraham is called the father of our faith. But you know what? A decade later, there were still no kids. That's hectic. 85 now, hey? We're marching on. 85, no kids. So we spoke about Abraham doubting and not being perfect. And so along comes his wife and says, listen here, let's make our own plan. There's Hagar, my servant. You sleep with her, have kids with her. Let's do it the easy way. So he does. Okay, shortcut. And what does he have? An Ishmael. And such a sad situation. Because God, after Ishmael's born and he starts to grow up, God still says, listen here, you made a mistake there. Isaac is the one that's going to be this offspring, this nation that's going to be created. So that's what Abraham does in a moment of humanity, and we do things in a moment of humanity as well. And sometimes they're big mess-ups, but we can never do anything that God can't fix. And I think we need to understand that. We're not called to perfection, we're called to faith. So fast forward another 14 years, 99 years old, still no kid. Can you imagine it, eh? But Abraham never lost faith. 24 years had passed since the promise was made, and he continued to believe. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 11 says, by faith Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. That's just amazing. Abraham and Sarah saying, God, you've promised something, you're faithful, we'll believe. And I just think of the Hebrews 11 Hall of Fame, of all those people that trusted. And in the end, it says that many of them actually died before they saw the thing they were trusting for. So that doesn't even stop your faith. You can believe right until the moment you die. You're still in faith. You're still trusting God. You haven't given up. As you sit here tonight, don't allow yourself, or do allow yourself to think back in time when you had a dream, a vision, when you believed something from God, something that God wanted to do in your life. Think back of that. Allow yourself to think about it. Allow God to start stirring that up again in you. So quietly, those things so easily and quietly just slip away and we forget about them. But God doesn't. Let's just talk a little bit about God's time and timing. It's an interesting one. 2 Peter 3 and verse 8 says, do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. So what we're sitting here is we're sitting in earth time, but God has God time. So our 1 day is 1,000 years, and vice versa. So I want to give you 2 examples. But before I do that, let me say this. In earth time, Jesus died 2,000 years ago. Is that right? About 2,000 years ago? But in God's time, it was the day before yesterday. It's amazing. So 2 examples. The one is you know those kids' toys that are like a spring, they're plastic. And they're short, they're about 10 centimeters long, but then when you pull them out, they can be maybe 3 meters long. So the question I want to ask tonight is, how long are they? Are they 10 centimeters or are they 3 meters? Same thing, different perspectives. Likewise, if I were to take a cord like this and we were to stretch it out across the room from one end to the other, and then you took a pair of scissors and you cut off the smallest part that you could, that cut off part would represent your time and the rest would be eternity. So God has such a different perspective on time. And that's why we can say that I'll trust God for my son until the day I die, if I need to. And if it only happens after that, that's God's problem. But I'm not going to stop trusting. What seems like an eternity to us can be a blink of an eye to God. From the time that God promised a new country to Abraham, took 500 years for that promise to be fulfilled. Incredible, eh? 500 years. In God's time, the perspective, 15 years, in God's time perspective, the 15 years we've waited for the fulfillment of promise is only a few hours. How are we doing time-wise? Just about it, eh? Okay, let me move on. Okay, got eternity. I'll just apply God's time tonight. You guys can sit here. So just take the pressure off yourself and embrace God's time. Say, God, your time, up to you. Test 3, making the ultimate sacrifice. So we're going to be talking about Isaac now. So Isaac is a young man, we think about 15 years old. And what does God say to Abraham? Take your son, your only son, and go up and sacrifice him in Mount Moriah. I mean, can you imagine it? But the faith was there. The trust was there. The scripture says that God knew, that Abraham knew that God was able to raise Isaac even if he killed him. So off he goes. But remember, and you've probably heard this a dozen times, when they leave the servants at the bottom of the mountain, he says, we're going up to make a sacrifice, we will return. That was faith speaking. Absolutely amazing, eh? So that was Abraham. Can you imagine his agonizing and all the rest? But can you imagine his resoluteness? It's like, God's spoken, I know he's spoken, by now he knows God's voice very well. I'm going to do it. What he does is his business, how he's going to fulfill this promise of the nation, of my offspring being a nation. That's his problem. I'm going to do what he told me to do. So that was the third test. And the answer is this. Are you willing to give God the one thing that you most want to keep? What is the thing that you hold on to the most? Is it like a wealthy person? That might be their wealth. That is everything. Whatever it might be that you think is the most valuable thing to you and you wouldn't want to give up. Maybe it's time to say, God, I release. Another thing I wanted to make here is that Abraham didn't deliberate and wait and think that maybe if he waited a bit longer, God would change his mind. The very next morning, they departed for Mount Moriah to make the sacrifice. So we all probably know this story very well. Takes Isaac up the mountain with a knife in his hand. At the very last possible moment, the angel says, Abraham, stop. No, don't do it. Don't harm your son. Now I know that you fear God because you haven't withheld your son. And Hebrews 11 says that Abraham reasoned with God that God would be able to raise his son from the dead. And figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. So quickly, tonight I must finish off. Tonight, what's your Isaac? What's the long-awaited, maybe almost forgotten thing that God has laid on your heart to do? What is your Isaac that you have to drive away, your Ishmael, that you have to drive away and banish to the desert? From now on and over the next few days, I want to just trust God that He ministers to your hearts and that you just move a little bit further, closer to Him in terms of trusting Him completely and moving into the thing that He's got for you. Thanks so much.